Hi, my name is Dr. Anthony Orsini, and I've been a practicing neonatologist for over 25 years. Early in my career, I noticed more and more frequently how very well-meaning, caring, and compassionate physicians often struggled to deliver sad or tragic news to patients and families, often making things worse. It was for that reason that I have dedicated my career to answering two questions. Is there a right way and a wrong way to deliver bad news? And if there is, can it be taught? And after 10 years of research and 25 years of experience, I can tell you without hesitation that the answer to both questions is yes. Now, traditionally, physicians have learned how to deliver bad news through watching other senior physicians who really never learned in the first place. In 1999, you may be familiar with an acronym called SPIKES, and in 1999, that was published. And to this day, it is still the majority of medical schools in the country and residency programs are still teaching this acronym SPIKES. And SPIKES certainly served its purpose. But through our research, we have found that there are certain things in SPIKES that, although may have served its purpose back in 1999, that the patient of 2026 may have issues with. And so, after interviewing hundreds and hundreds of patients, we came up with over 15 years ago our acronym called PROGRAM. And I'm proud that many medical schools now are using this acronym and even more residency programs. So, for the remainder of this video, what I'd like to do is familiarize you with the program acronym on how to deliver bad news and give you some basic knowledge on how you can deliver bad news in the most compassionate and effective manner the next time you're speaking to a family member or a patient. The first letter is P. P stands for plan and position. It's always amazed me that physicians and really anyone else will go into a difficult conversation of any kind without having a plan. My recommendation is before you have that difficult conversation with the patient, stop on the other side of the door. We joke, take your own pulse and think about how you want to present this news. All news should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I'd like to tell people, think of yourself as a director of a movie, and that's where the position comes into place. You want to make sure that from any movie, before filming or writing any novel, per se, or having any difficult conversation, that you have all your pieces in place. Think about how you want to present this news. When you open up the door and see which family members are in the room, who's there, position the chairs so that you can have a conversation. If there's more than just you and the patient, move a chair. Chairs move. If there's no chair in the room, go get one at the nurse's station. Make sure that everyone involved can see you and that you can sit close enough to them. If at one point you feel that it's appropriate to touch, you can absolutely do that. So make sure that you're planning how to do this ahead of time and then position everybody in the right spot. Now, remember, by doing all this, you're going to set yourself up for success and not have a situation where it can become awkward later on. The R is for review. It is so important for you to review the facts with your patient and family first. It's a great way to start out by saying, what is your understanding of what's going on? Even though the patient might have been with you during this journey, it's okay for them to speak. Let them tell you what they know and then fill in the blanks. Here's one of the most important things that I can teach you. We may know as physicians and providers how we came to a conclusion or a diagnosis, but the patients don't understand how we think. So it's very important to take the patient through your thought process on how you came to, and here's the key word that I want you to remember, how you came to the reluctant diagnosis. Tell the patient, I reviewed your x-rays. When you first came in, perhaps, let's say this was a lung cancer diagnosis. Mr. Smith, when you arrived in my office, if you remember, you came in with bleeding when you coughed. Now, sometimes that may not be something of concern, but sometimes it's something more serious. So in your case, I was concerned enough to send you to the pulmonologist, and the pulmonologist did a biopsy. And when the pulmonologist was doing the biopsy, they send some stuff to the lab. I reviewed the results with the pathologist. And by saying this, you're saying that you really did check all your boxes with the patient. And I reviewed the results with the pathologist, and I'm sorry to tell you that the biopsy results were consistent with cancer. That is a review. The review serves many purposes. One, letting them speak first allows you and the patients to kind of coordinate feelings, to get on the same page. It also allows you to calm down in your epinephrine. Listen, no matter how many times you do this, you're going to be nervous. So letting them speak, getting on the same pages, watching their nonverbal language, they're watching yours, gets you on the same page. The review also serves an even bigger purpose in that it's leading up to the news. And when we get to the G program, which stands for gradual, we're using our review to prepare the patient for the bad news. Now, if you remember taking your spikes, and this is one of the biggest problems that I've seen with patients and spikes, is spikes acknowledges that we never want to blind somebody. We never want to blindside somebody on the news, and we want to prepare them for the news. But spikes often suggests during their teaching that we're going to prepare people for the bad news by saying, I have bad news. Well, in speaking to hundreds and hundreds of patients, and it kind of makes sense if you think about it, if you're going to the doctor because you're worried about a biopsy result, or you're worried because your loved one has been into an accident or had a heart attack, when the physician says, I have bad news, that is the bad news. The, the, the reason that we try to build up to the bad news is to prepare people by bracing them and to make sure that they hear what we're saying. Because once you give the bad news, the patient will get the epinephrine surge and they'll stop hearing things. So by coming in and telling a patient, I'm sorry, I have bad news, that creates an epinephrine surge, an adrenaline surge. The patient just stops hearing things. So instead of telling them that you have bad news, it's best to show them bad news. And that's the biggest take home message that I'd like to share with you today. So just show them that you have bad news. And by reviewing the case with them, that is the first part of showing them that you have the bad news, going step by step of through your thought process of each step and the evidence that you are showing for that, again, reluctant diagnosis. And so I like to say, think of yourself as an attorney who's doing a closing argument. It's much more effective when the attorney gives all the evidence to the jury and then says, this is why the person's guilty, as opposed to them saying he's guilty and this is why. And this is the most common mistake that people make in the thousands of physicians that I've trained. I can say this is by far the most common mistake, is that they say the bad news first. The patient stops listening because they've just been told they had cancer. And then when they try to present all the evidence, nothing is heard. So the R is for review, and I can't overemphasize how much this R is important. Take the time, and that's part of your plan, right? So when you are coming up with your plan, you're going to think about how can I present the bad news so that A, they understand that this is a reluctant diagnosis, that I checked all my boxes and I double checked this, and B, that I was able to prepare them. What we like to tell our physicians that we're training is if you've done your review right, the patient should almost know that the bad news is coming before you hear it. Now, to step aside for a second, because one of the questions I get is, are you delaying the bad news? And that's an excellent question. There is a fine line between preparing the patient and dragging it out. So a good review may not take more than a few sentences, and depending on what the diagnosis is, you may need a longer review or a shorter review. But please remember that the review has to happen first because that's going to lead up to the bad news. Now, I mentioned before that we want to show the patient that we have bad news and not say that. Well, that's the O. O stands for observe, which is basically they're observing your body language and I'm observing their body language. You must make sure that your nonverbal cues, your body language, are consistent with your verbals. Because when patients see, or anyone sees, that the verbals and nonverbals don't coincide, they're not consistent. I can say all the right things. I can tell the patient how sorry I am, show a lot of compassion with my verbals. But if I'm sitting back in a chair, if I'm relaxed, if I'm standing up, and never stand up giving bad news, and I'll get to that in a second. But if I'm standing up or I'm sitting back casual, the patient's going to say, well, Dr. Orsini's saying all the right things, but he looks very casual, like this is not important to them, and that will create anger. So during your review, you might also, the R and the O go together, okay? Preparing the patient for the bad news. You use the review, you use proper body language, and you're observing them to see how they're receiving this message. And that leads up to the G, which I believe is the most important letter, and that's gradual. You never want to be abrupt. You never want to blindside a patient. And again, that's consistent with what they teach in spikes, but we suggest that you do it differently and not ever say, I have bad news. Break that bad news gradually. Put it in simple terms. What I like to say to somebody in very simple terms, that proper delivery of sad or traffic news should consist of a good review, provide the evidence, deliver the news gradually, but deliver it, say you're sorry, and then be quiet. It is so important to allow patients to process when you say something important, especially when you're saying the words like death or cancer, or it could be bad news that's not bad news, terribly bad news, like you can't play in the championship football game this Saturday. But pause between each sentences as you're preparing the patient. And once you deliver the bad news, sit quietly with them. Say you're sorry, and then sit and let them process. How long should you sit and let them process? You're going to be reviewing and looking at their body language, letting them react, sit with them. Sitting with them in silence says a lot. It says that you, as the provider, are comfortable, that you're not looking to run out of the room, and it says that you care and that you're willing to spend as much time with them as they need. And then they'll show you verbal cues on when you can start beginning again. The second R is for relationship. We are the ones who are literally changing these people's lives. As I like to say, we are redefining who they are. They went from married couple to widow, to happy family, to someone who's got cancer, to someone who just lost a child. So it's really important for us to understand that we are very important in that room. Speaking in pronouns that are in the first person really help build that relationship. Sitting there and saying, I am your physician. I'm going to help you through this. Instead of using words like we or the team. So try to use first person singular when you're speaking about yourself. It's okay to say my team and I, we tried to resuscitate your husband. My team and I worked on your husband and tried to bring his heart rate back. That's okay. But just please remember, this is what I want to remember. It's just the two of you in that room. They're going to remember 20 years down the line what you were wearing, what you smelled like, whether you were nervous, and whether you seemed compassionate or not. So it's really important for you to solidify that relationship and understand, as one mother said to me who I interviewed, that you're going to be part of their Thanksgiving dinner every day, because when they think about their loved ones, they're going to be thinking about you. So the second R is relationship. The A is accountability. Understand that you're the most important person in the room besides the patient, obviously, and that they need you, that they should be able to feel like you're with them, you're compassionate, and that you're the expert in the room. The patient and family should feel that they can wrap their arms around your shoulders and you will lead them to the next step. And so be accountable. Tell them, I'll sit with you as long as you want. If you're a primary care physician and you're sending the patient to an oncologist, you may think that they know that the oncologist is going to keep you in the loop, but they might not know that. Saying to the patient, listen, I'm sending you to the oncologist for further care and treatment, but I'm still your doctor. I'm going to stay involved with you. You can call me at any time, and I'll be checking in with Dr. Smith to see how you're doing. Little things like that mean everything to them. And then the final letter is M, or meet. So many times after we deliver sad or tragic news, especially it's a death, we say we're sorry, we bring the patient's family over to the patient, and then we leave. They may not know what the next steps are. It's really important for you to tell them what the next steps are. If it's a cancer diagnosis or a bleed in the brain or something like to that effect, just say to the patient's families, after we leave today, you're inevitably going to have more questions. This also shows you're not trying to hide something. I'm here. Here's my card. Even better, would it be okay if I checked on you in a few days? Or tell them, here's the next step. I'm sending you to the oncologist. Dr. Smith is a friend of mine. He works out of the same hospital. I know him personally. If it's okay with you, I'll give him a call and see if he can fit you in. Boy, does that go a long way in telling the patient that you're there for them. So the M is meet again. Be very specific. If you say, I'll be in touch, tell them when you'll be in touch. If it's a hospital, say, I'll check on you in 15 minutes, in a half an hour. And if something happens and you can't do that, send somebody in and say, Dr. Orsini got busy, but he's still planning on checking on you. If you follow this acronym program, it'll be a nice little guide. I suggest that everybody take a course in Breaking Bad News, and you can contact me at the Orsini Way to figure out how we can do that either remotely or in person with our role-playing sessions. We've trained over 4,000 physicians on one-on-one using improvisational role-playing with professional actors, and we've done it remotely and we've done it in person. But hopefully, if you can't get to a better program that's going to be able to help you exercise through this, that using this program acronym will help you get through it next time you have to do it. Because every physician at one time or another, whether they're a neonatologist, an oncologist, or a family doctor, they're going to have to break bad news. And as I said, most of us were never trained on this. And I know you may or may not remember your spikes from medical school if you're younger. But there's a few things about spikes that I hope you'll think about before exercising and maybe adapt the program acronym. So, but without getting into a bigger comparison of that, I just want to say I hope you're going to take your training seriously. And finally, the last thing I'll say to you is the best thing that you can do about delivering bad news is to not think of it as a task that you must get over. And I don't blame everyone for thinking that, because if you're not trained on how to do a procedure, of course it's gonna create anxiety. If as a neonatologist, if I was told to do an appendectomy, for instance, there would be a lot of anxiety involved in that. And so if you get trained on how to have these difficult conversations, you'll become more comfortable with it. And I want you to stop thinking of this as a task that you have to get over with, as something that's just necessary as a physician, and start to think about what it really is. It's an opportunity for you to help the patient and family when they need you the most. Once you take pride in that you can do this well, that you can be there for your patients, it's something that you can really do. We can't always cure disease, but we can always help patients. So I hope that that was a nice basic understanding of the program acronym and how to deliver bad news. If you ever need any questions or concerns, you can contact me through the orsiniway.com, and I'd love to speak to you about it more. So thank you and good luck.